Hi, I'm Rich Story. Welcome to another Level Up Cartooning. All you ever need to follow along with me is a pencil and paper. It doesn't get any easier than that, right? Now, before we get started, make sure you hit the thumbs up and subscribe button as it helps this channel to grow, and hit the bell so you never miss a lesson. So we've been drawing some of the stars of the first wave of anime series to hit the TV networks here in the US back in the 1960s, and I've got a few more to go. But with Easter now upon us, I thought it was a good time to draw a character I've always loved and I've only drawn once, that being Peter Rabbit, the star of Beatrix Potter's 1902 The Tale of Peter Rabbit, and 5 other books, which to date have sold over 150 million copies and have spawned numerous movies and TV specials. Fun fact, in 1903, Peter Rabbit became the first fictional character to be made into a patented stuffed toy, making him the oldest licensed character. Remember that if you ever go on Jeopardy! Anyway, we're going to be drawing the final line of Peter Rabbit using pen and ink, and in this case, I'm using my Tachikawa pen with a standard G nib, and my ancient ink bottle filled with Higgins Black Magic ink. If you're with me back a few weeks ago, I used this to draw our children's book version of Paddington the Bear. I encourage you to watch that because, as with the Paddington video, rather than just coloring it digitally like I normally do, I thought I would throw a little watercolor wash over our final lines. I'll be using this set of watercolors by Sennelier. Also, for those wondering, I'll be drawing and painting on a type of paper I've used for almost all of my work over the last 30 years. In cartoon syndication and children's books, that being Strathmore Bristol 500 series. I happen to like the hot press, which is the plate or smooth finish. I've been meaning to set up a link to all of this stuff, but being the procrastinating artist that I am, I haven't gotten around to it. If you see the link, that means I finally did. Anyway, let's draw. We're going to draw Peter Rabbit step by step, giving you the secret formula to be able to draw him again and again. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know I normally use the character's head to figure out how big the entire character is. In this running pose of Peter, he's a little over 3 heads tall. In other words, however tall his head is, his entire body is a little over 3 of those, not counting his ears or his left foot, both of which stick out a little bit at the top and the bottom of our drawing. Okay, so let's lay out that roadmap for Peter Rabbit. So there's our roadmap of Peter Rabbit. Now before we go on to step 2, I want to give you the layout of Peter using simple shapes for those of you who want a screen grab. Just something to help you when you're laying out your drawing. Okay, so now we're on to step 2. In this step, we do what I call roughing out the features. I want to remind you that until the third and final step, you want to draw as light as possible. You'll see that I use guidelines to help you to know where to put Peter's eyes and muzzle and other things. We don't want those guidelines in the final drawing, so you want to draw them light enough to be able to erase them easily. I also want to quickly point out that with Peter being a fluffy rabbit, it is at this stage where we begin to rough out the look of Peter's fur. And if you've seen some of my other videos on drawing fur, you know that you don't want to draw that fur too stiff or too exact. You want to introduce a bit of randomness to that fur to make it feel natural. That includes some places where you leave a little space between that line. Doing so takes practice and patience. And I've said this before, drawing fur and hair is one of the harder things to master. So don't get discouraged and just keep at it. Anyway, what do you say we rough out the features for Peter Rabbit? Okay, so there's the roughed out features for Peter Rabbit. So now with the roadmap done and the features roughed out, it's time for that final step. In step 3, we get to have fun. We get to draw in the final details of Peter. We don't have to guess where to put things because we've already done all the hard work to figure that out. I'll say it again. You want to pay close attention when drawing in the final lines of that fur to keep that soft and fluffy feel by not connecting each line. If you're using a pencil, one of the secrets is to not press too hard. If you're going to use the pen, then you want to vary that line, which means sometimes with a light touch, but here and there, a bit of pressure to thicken the line. Whether you use pencil, pen, or digital, it's important to be present. And what I mean by that is you don't want to just mindlessly retrace over the lines you've already drawn. Always draw with an eye on tweaking and improving until the very end. Okay? So let's draw in the details for Peter Rabbit. Okay, so there is the pen and ink version of Peter. So now as a little bonus, much like I did a few weeks ago with Paddington, I'm going to throw in a little watercolor wash over my final lines, using my little Sennelier kit here and my trusty Winsor Newton University brushes. So what do you say we throw in a little color wash on Peter Rabbit? And that's how you do it. There you have it. Beatrix Potter's classic character, Peter Rabbit. So how do you think you did? Understand, if you've never drawn Peter before, then you can't expect to have drawn him perfectly, pen and ink or not. And as we talked about, drawing fur can be very tricky. That said, now you have the secret formula, the process for drawing Peter Rabbit. And with that, you can draw him again and again. And I encourage you not only to try the pen and ink, but also try the watercolor wash when you're done. I promise each time you draw Peter, it's going to be a little better and a little easier. I also promise the more you work with me, the better you're going to get at all of your cartoon characters. So I'd love to see your drawing of Peter Rabbit. If you can, take a picture and post it on either Facebook or Instagram. And don't forget to include the hashtag #LevelUpCartooning. I hope you had as much fun as I did with this one. Remember to subscribe, and thanks for joining me. Until next time, happy Easter, and keep drawing, my friends.